Today we're going to talk about PneuView software. This is the PneuView 3 software, and the software is part of the PneuView system. It's provided with every PneuView system we sell, part of the PneuView system is also a laptop computer with PneuView installed. So when you receive your PneuView system, you have a laptop that has the PneuView 3 icon on the main display. Double-clicking on that opens up your first setup menu. In this setup menu, at the top of the display, you'll see the version of software that you've been provided and that's loaded on this computer. Next, if you're connected to your lung simulator and you've turned on the power, the PneuView will interpret which device, which model you're connected to. And based on the model, it'll give you options for the lung view. Today we're connected to a dual adult lung simulator, and so we have the option for left, right, or combined lung measurements. We're going to do combined for this demonstration. Number 2 asks for an expected breath rate, and again we have a low rate and a high frequency rate. Most often you might be working in this low frequency 0 to 100 breaths per minute. If you're working above that, you want to make the other selection here. Number 3 asks for gas reference conditions, and again this is important because we measure the actual conditions obviously, but if your ventilator has been calibrated or assumes a different gas standard, you want to select that here. Many critical care ventilators assume body temperature, pressure, saturated gas conditions. So if you happen to be testing with a dry gas at room temperature, your numbers will not match the ventilator settings unless you've selected this proper gas condition. Again, today we're going to work with a simple transport ventilator and use ATPX measurements. The last entry here is for barometric pressure, and this is where you enter the actual barometric pressure. This number doesn't change your calculations greatly, but it is for reference conditions unless you're at a very high altitude or in the depths where there's a very low pressure. It will not have a significant effect on measurements, but it's an important reference condition. Lastly, and probably most importantly, is that you must click here before starting the active data acquisition. And before clicking there, it's important to remove all the pressure from the test lungs and that you're not ventilating the lungs. If you're ventilating the lungs when you click this and start the active data acquisition, your numbers will not be good. PneuView uses pressure measurements in the lung and at the airway, along with the setting for compliance to calculate flow and volume. And to do that, we have to start with a known 0 point. So that's why it's important, again, to have no pressure in the lungs at 0 when you select this square and start the software. I'm going to start acquisition now. So my lung simulator is turned on. At this point I'm not ventilating, and so we have a flat line. At any point you can expand this display so that you can get rid of the clutter in the back of your display and look only at PneuView software. So let's look at the areas on the screen. Up at the top again is the version of software you're working with. Beneath that is the reference conditions. Here's again where we have the lung selection, the gas standard, and the barometric pressure that we entered in the setup screen. Up to the right we have the lung compliance settings and the resistor settings. Now lung compliance, because we're looking at a dual adult system with a left and right lung, there are 2 compliance settings. It's extremely important that these compliance settings match the compliance spring setting on the lungs. If these numbers don't match what's happening at the lungs, again, your calculations will not be accurate. And so there's a right and a left because the lungs can be set independently with different compliance. You also set your resistor values here for right and left lung. Now again, the resistor values do not affect our calculations, but they certainly affect how the lung is being ventilated, what your waveforms will look like, and what your values will appear to be. I'm going to turn on the ventilator now. I may get a short alarm, so bear with me. There it is. And begin to ventilate the test lungs. At this point, I'm turning off my alarm so that we're not interrupted by that. And you'll see that we now have waveforms appearing on the screen and numerical data. The top waveform is a flow waveform, and the value to the right of that is a peak inspiratory flow. Any of the waveforms here on the display can be scaled to fill the display by clicking on the arrows in that waveform display. So on the top we have flow and peak inspiratory flow values. In the middle we have the proximal pressure waveform. To the right, the peak proximal pressure measurement and a PEEP measurement. And on the bottom we have the volume waveform along with the inspiratory tidal volume, the expiratory tidal volume, and a minute volume. Down on the bottom of the screen we have measurements of lung temperature, oxygen, FiO2, if you've connected the oxygen sensor. Otherwise you'll see a dashed line. You see a total breath rate, along with over on the left, inspiratory time, expiratory time, and I to E ratio. On the very bottom of the screen, you will see some real-time values for lung pressures, flow, tidal volume, and proximal airway pressure. And those will change during the course of the breath because those are real-time values and actively changing. I'm going to one more time look here. Turn this one off. Okay. Lastly, and very importantly, over on the left-hand side of the screen, you have your mode selection menu. Now we're going to get more in depth into the mode selections, but there are basically 5 modes of operation in PneuView. There's the active acquisition mode, which is open and happening as we speak. But you're also able to record this data, replay the data, grab the numeric values, or actually run a trend test. And those are all available over here on the left side in the mode selection menu. So again, the 2 things to review as far as the basics of getting good numbers here is that we have to, in the setup screen, make sure we've selected the gas standard properly, make sure that we've started PneuView with 0 pressure in the lungs, and up here on the top, make sure that we have the compliance values entered correctly and matching where the compliance springs are set on the lung simulator. Those are the basics, and in a future video we'll talk in more detail about how to work with the different modes for data acquisition and saving and recalling results. Thank you.